Hi, Kevin here. Welcome to the Claremont Classic Garage. Today we've got a little bit of an unexpected episode. I was out running the chipper with the Ferguson and it spit out the drive shaft for the feed roller. That's not good. No feed means no chipping. So we're going to see what we can do about fixing it. It's not like I can go into the corner and buy parts for this thing. So let's see what we got to do to get this thing going again. So here's the offending bits. It's a two-piece shaft. It's like a sliding telescopic shaft. It doesn't have set screws or pins to hold it on. What it does is this great big spring goes on it in between these two seats, which keeps it expanded and keeps it on. It's square drive on the ends. It's a 1/2 inch square drive. Now, these universal joints are so cheap. They're just metal on metal. This one actually blew up a while ago and I put a bolt through it. Oh, that finally gave up the ghost today. But I mean, look at this. It's just destroyed. So what we're going to try and use is something a little more substantial. These are greasable. They're for farm equipment. Way better. So we're going to try and put something together with these. Hopefully we can. I'm not expecting too much trouble. The trick will be converting it from round to square. I'm not sure if I'm going to cut these off and just weld them onto this. Or, well, we'll come up with something. Anyway, let's get to work. Here's where the shaft goes. Here's the feed roller down in here. And this is the drive unit. It's a little gearbox with this belt on it. I'm not sure what the ratio is. This engages in this dog here. Engages and disengages it. So, we'll come up with something. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to replace this thing. As you can see, at its shortest, it needs to be about 9 inches long. I looked up on the website or whatever there's a few people that supply parts for these, and I can buy this as an exact factory replacement part for it's a lot of money. It's like $140 or something. And it's just going to be the same piece of crap that you can't lubricate, and it's just going to end up like that again. So I'm not too interested in that. So I'll show you with a few options that I've come up with. Here I've got a few different telescopic intermediate steering shafts from old scrap cars. I could possibly use one of those. It's certainly a much better quality joint than what's in there, but there's still no access to get grease into it. I can go a little bit further and a little more heavy duty, and this is proper agricultural stuff. See, grease fitting. This is something we can really use. Problem is, remember I said I need it, the shortest it can be is 9 inches. And these two joints, end to end, you can see are 10.5. Now, what can we do about that? Not a lot. I could shorten these. I can cut down these collars. Another thing I can do if I have to, I can get a longer belt and move the drive unit out a little further. That'll make up a little bit of it. Then I might have to re-engineer this a little bit. This is the emergency kickoff for the drive, but I'm not too worried about that. Probably just a matter of extending this bracket out, and then that'll work fine. So those are a few options I've got. I'm going to ponder it and do some psychic engineering, and we'll come up with the best plan of attack. Another thing I need to consider when making my decision is that this spring goes in between the two parts of this telescopic shaft, and it serves two purposes. Purpose number one is, you can see there's no grub screws or anything on this. So the spring forces the shaft to expand and keeps it from popping out. The other thing it does is it pushes on this dog. See, when you engage the clutch, it pushes on that and keeps the clutch engaged while you're running. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to switch to a pull spring on the outside to keep that pulled. The kickoff will still work. It's just something we have to take into consideration when we're designing this. I would really like to be able to use these. So the easiest way to go about using these is to either make them shorter or move the drive unit further away from center. And I think rather than cutting up these, I'm just going to move this thing away from center a little bit. It's just the easiest way. So we're going to start working on that, and we're going to use these, and we're going to make our new shaft, and everything should be perfect. Okay, I've got the transfer box off. The first thing we're going to do is cut this flange off here. And we're going to cut the flange off the transfer box mounting plate. We're going to extend each of these by 2 inches and put them on. Then I also have to remove the transfer box from the plate, and then I'll drill 4 new holes and move it that way a little bit. That'll allow us the room that we need so we can use these heavy-duty U-joints. I'm going to make a completely new drive. We'll show you all that as we get to it. But first we have to modify this. I'm going to take this off with a cut-off disc on a 4.5-inch angle grinder. When you're doing stuff like this, it's not a bad idea to make sure you've got a fire extinguisher handy, hearing protection, and some safety glasses. It's just peace of mind. Okay, here we go. Alrighty, we got that sawed off. Now we have to make our piece that's going to go on the end. So I found this nice little piece of angle already made. The only problem with it, it's just a little bit too long. So we're going to get out the chop saw and cut 3/4 of an inch off each end of it, and this will be good to go. Okay, here we go. Got her in the chop saw. I already cut the other end off. We'll get this chopped off and then we can go test fit it. Alright, I like how that looks. Before I go ahead and weld it on, I'm going to take it back off and we'll drill the 2 holes for the adjuster bolts in it. Then we can weld her on. Got that all ready to go. Now I can go ahead and weld it in place. Here's my rig. I've had it for a long time. I run it on 035 flux core. Geez, I'm getting low. I've got this old one. It's a 120 machine. It runs on 030 flux core. I use that for lighter stuff. And if things get real serious, we call on the old buzz box. Anyway, let's get this thing welded on and we'll go from there. Now we're going to extend the adjustment slots so we can pull the the transfer box away from center. Okay, that's those 2 guys lengthened. Now we're going to have to mark, drill the ends, and I'll lengthen these. To do this, I'm just connecting the holes with my handy dandy Sawzall here. Well, Sawzall is a brand name, but this is my reciprocating saw. But I do use Sawzall brand Milwaukee blades. These are called the Torch, and they're the best blades I've ever found. I get them at TSC. I wait for them to come on sale, and I buy them in bulk. I go through lots of them. Okay, so the holes are drilled. Now we'll connect the dots with the Sawzall. So we got that all done. Now the next thing we have to do is make some clearance for the bolts that hold the transfer box to the bottom of the transfer box plate. It can almost come back all the way, but just not quite. So we'll mark that out and give it another inch or so of travel. Then we can mock this thing on here and start getting the shaft put together. I decided I'm just going to cut this red piece right out of there rather than try to drill and saw it out after. There won't be a lot left of it anyway. And then what we'll do to give this strength, we'll gusset it on the sides here. It'll be plenty strong. So I'm going to cut the other side. I'll weld these little joints here, and then we'll carry on. That looks great. Now I'm going to go ahead and dress the welds down with the grinder because the plate has to slide over them. We'll get that cleaned up as good as we can. There, I like that. Now let's get the transfer box on there and see how it looks. Here it is here. Yeah, that's great. That'll give us the extra room now to get the drive shaft in. And we can use those heavy U-joints. And I'll never ever have to worry about that again. This drive shaft in here is the Achilles of these little Chinese chippers. If you go on the internet, that's all you read. Feed drive shaft, feed drive shaft, feed drive shaft. And this is the second design. The original ones that they had on these were even worse, and they engineered a solution. Oh well, we're going to engineer a solution to the solution. And before I get too far, I have to gusset up this. See how flimsy it is? So, I'm just going to use the two pieces we cut off already. That one's going to fit nicely in there. And then I'll make something out of this one to fit over here on this side. And we'll be good to go. Got our two little pieces made. Now I'm going to tack them in. Okay, so that's good. We've got 11 inches in between here now when the shaft is at its shortest. And if you remember, we needed 10.5. So we're half an inch to the good. And I can even pull it a little further depending on belt selection. So we're going to go ahead now and start making the drive shaft. Okay, so there's a couple of things we're going to correct from the original one. If you'll notice, these U-joints are not in phase. By meaning of in phase, you want your U-joint yokes to be perfectly aligned. And you can see these ones are not. That does not help your U-joint survive. An out of phase U-joint or a drive shaft is very bad. And I tried this all kinds of different ways and I couldn't get it in phase. I was hoping that because that was a hex, one of the 6 ways it would get it back in phase, but it wouldn't. So, garbage. Now, our new shaft, you'll see the way I'm going to make it, I'm going to do everything square rather than hex. So it's going to be very easy to keep this in phase. But one thing we got to do right off the bat before I do anything else is I have to change these grease fittings. Because the way it is now, I literally have to take the shaft apart, take it out, so I can turn it like that to grease it. So we're going to take those out and put some 90-degree ones in. That's the first job. And then when we build the shaft, we're going to make sure that these are on the inboard side, like they are now, facing each other, so it's much easier to grease it. I've replaced the grease fittings to 90-degree ones, so it's easy to grease. Now we're going to go ahead and convert these round holes to the square holes that we need to drive the shaft. So what I've got here is I found this old piece of square tube. It's a 3/4 square tube. It's 1/2 inch ID. It fits over these things quite nicely. See? Perfect. And it fits inside the bore of that end. Needs a little touch of file or something. But anyway, we'll get it. Better than loose, isn't it? So that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to cut 4 pieces of this, and then we'll start putting this thing together. What we're going to do next is weld this square stock into the U-joint to make the round hole in the U-joint into a square hole. So this grub screw here is what's actually going to hold it on to the implement. So I had to make a clearance hole because I don't want the grub screw pushing on that. I want it to go right through that and push right on the shaft. So we laid that out, drilled the hole. Now I'm going to mock it all together and weld it. So there we go. They've got square holes in them now. And these will attach to either end. Now, despite my telling myself that I wanted these grease fittings on the inboard side of the U-joints, I managed to get them on the outboard sides. Doesn't matter. I'll get grease into them. Now we're going to make the actual drive part of this. So I was just cutting some bits of square tube and I've lost one. So when I find it, I'll be back. I've got the female side of the drive. Boy, that's still hot. All done. Now we've got this little shaft here and this kind of like a bushing, and we're going to make the male side of the drive. I'm purposely making it a little bit long. That way I know when I go to put it together, I've got a little wiggle room. All my pieces are made. Now we're going to put it on the machine and see what it looks like. Like I said, I made everything a little bit long. Better than making it a little bit short. We can shorten it up to suit. And the next thing I'm going to have to do is try and come up with a belt for this thing. That looks pretty snazzy, I'd say. Okay, let me go get my big bin of belts. My success rate with my big bin of belts is not so good. I always have the one that's longer than what I need and the one that's shorter than what I need. But hey, you never know. The right one may be waiting in the bin of belts. I'll be back. You know what? I didn't have a belt that would work. So I hopped in the car and zipped over to Canadian Tire and got a selection. One of these will be the right one and I'll return the other two. So that looks pretty good. We had a 42-inch belt on there before. Now we've got a 44. I think we'll be fine. The only thing I would maybe like to do would be to put a flat idler over here just to get the belt away from that bit of frame there, but that's not that big a deal. We'll see how it works like this. If I use the 45-inch belt, it gets this transfer box even further away from the center line and gives me even more room for this drive shaft to operate. What I run into then is, you can see in there, the belt touches the frame. So what we've done, I've got this old idler pulley off an engine, an old car engine, and we're just going to put that right there. And that will get that belt off of the chassis of the machine and take up a little bit of tension, because what I really need is a 44.5. So I'm going to try that. Just figure out where exactly it has to be to take the slack of the belt and give me a little adjustment, and we should be good to go. I'll be back. What I got to do is weld a bolt onto the structure of the machine to take this pulley. Okay, I welded on an old bolt, and there's our idler pulley installed. Now I'm going to put the belt on and we'll see if we can tighten it up. So there we are. Now you can see I've got far enough away. The idler did the trick. When this is at its shortest, everything level, I can disengage the clutch and I've got room. The only thing I'm going to do is when I disengage the clutch, it just touches the end of the driven shaft. So I'm going to mark that. And we're going to pull that back out, and I'm just going to cut, what's that, about 1/2 inch off that shaft. And we're going to be all set. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Another thing I'm going to do when I've got this apart, I'm going to drill down this hole through the square tube, and then I'll tap this where the grub screw would have been and put a grease fitting in it so we can grease the slip joint. This is going to be, for this, a 1/8 pipe thread. So for that, you drill with a letter Q drill bit, which I've already done. And then we use our 1/8 pipe tap, and we're going to tap it out. Put a little oil on it, and we'll tap it out. That's good. Now I'm going to shoot some grease in the U-joint. Might as well pre-lube it. So there we go. It's all together. Clutch is engaged now. It's clutch disengaged. We'll re-engage it. Now I'm going to lower the drum back down to the, or lower the feed roller back down to the bottom of the hopper, and we'll see how much engagement we have on the slip joint. Alright, so that's half the battle. Now what we got to do is get this cover on and get all our linkages and everything re-engineered so it'll work with this transfer box way the heck over here. It's about 2 inches past where it used to be, so hopefully it won't be too big a deal to get everything recombobulated. So the first thing we'll have to do is make a new lid for this cover. And then I'll have to move everything 2 inches, 2 inches, 2 inches, and maybe move that 2 inches. And that should just make everything work again. We're going to find out anyway. And I'll have to make this slot 2 inches longer. I don't think it's that big a deal. But first thing we got to do is cut the end of this box off because it hits the transfer box. This all seems to be working well. I moved everything over 2 inches. Turns out this, for some reason, I guess the angle of this is different or something, or it was never right to start with, which is entirely possible. Anyway, this is good now. Now what I'm doing is I'm boxing in the end of this cover. The cover used to end here, but you can see the the transfer box is there now, so I'm just making the cover a little bit longer. I put in a piece of angle iron here. This is the original end off the box, and we're just filling in the sides. Then I guess what I'll do is, once I know this is all working, I will take the cover back off. I'll take the tractor outside, fire it up, and make sure the shaft is working properly. It'll need a bit of a spring to make sure the clutch dog stays applied. So I welded these 2 tabs on, and I'll bend a new hook on this spring, and that'll just put a little tension on this to make sure that the clutch stays on while the thing's running. There we go. So the spring puts a little tension on this, but the emergency stop still works. That if you get pulled in and you bump against here, it stops the feed. So that's good. We're gonna, I guess now, go outside. I'll take the covers off, and we'll start the tractor up and make sure everything looks good. I'll give it a final grease, and we'll put it to work and see what happens. All right, she's running. I haven't engaged the feed roller yet, but you can see the belt. The idler pulley, that all worked out pretty well. Happy with that. Now let's engage the feed roller and see what happens. Not sure what's banging, but not banging now. There must have been something stuck in. So hopefully when we go to start chipping, this is going to last a lot better than what was there. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to throw the covers back on and whip it out back, and we'll fire some wood through it. A little different than what was there, eh? Jeez. What a piece of shit. Oh well. We're going to put her back together and put it to work. Well, even if this thing doesn't work, it's a nice night to go for a ride on the Ferguson. It's absolutely spectacular. There's not a cloud in the sky. Birds are singing, frogs are singing. Everybody's out walking, riding bikes, driving old cars. What a beautiful day. Barn swallows to come back. I haven't seen any of them around yet. The geese mostly seem to have moved on. I think they've all gone up north for the summer to get fat, make baby geese or whatever the hell they do. Can I fit through there? I better not try. Looks a lot different back here now. There was a lot of trees back here before, but they're mostly all gone now. There was 2 great big thorn trees back here. We had to get rid of those. They're lethal, man. Reverse. Put the brake on. Can idle it down for a minute. I gotta turn the chute 180 degrees and then we'll be ready to rock and roll. Okay, chipper's running, the PTO's going. The tractor's just idling for now. I'm gonna turn the feed roller on. There it goes. See it turning? Now I'm going to speed up the engine and we'll start putting wood in it. I'll just feed some little stuff through it. You can see it go. It's running pretty good. I just wanted to make sure that the drive wasn't going to kick out. Okay, that's good. I'm going to shut her down and get back to the shop. Well, that was great. Thing works perfectly. All it needs now is some cleanup and painting. That's going to have to wait till winter because I get no time for painting now. I need to be chipping. So we're going to go out tomorrow and give this thing a good workout. Clean up the rest of them trees in that little area there. And then we'll have a good idea whether this thing is gonna be good for the duration or not. I'm not too concerned about it. It worked pretty well there. I'm quite happy with it. That was a job well done, but it took me all day. I started on this at 8 o'clock this morning and now it's 7 o'clock at night. Unreal. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Hope you learned something. I sure learned a lot. If you like what you saw, down there, you know, like button, subscribe button, comment box, share it, and most of all, enjoy it. And take some time to watch some of my other videos. There's something for everybody. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks for tuning into the Claremont Classic Garage, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.